The debate was supposed to be routine, another televised committee hearing where lawmakers traded their usual arguments. But that afternoon, the cameras captured something very different, a clash that instantly went viral. Jim Jordan leaned forward, speaking over his colleagues with his usual booming tone, determined to corner Representative Jasmine Crockett with a question he believed would expose a weakness in her stance. He cited a point of law with confidence, smirking as though he had already won the exchange. The audience, both in the room and watching at home, braced for another tense showdown. Crockett, however, didn't flinch. She listened carefully, allowing Jordan to finish without interruption. Her calm demeanor contrasted sharply with his rising volume. Then, when the moment was right, she leaned into her microphone and delivered a precise, devastating rebuttal. "Mr. Jordan," she began, "you just cited the law incorrectly. What you've described isn't even the correct statute. If you're going to lecture this committee, at least read the law you're quoting." The room froze. Jordan blinked rapidly, clearly caught off guard. He shuffled through his papers, trying to recover, but the cameras zoomed in. His notes didn't contain what Crockett had just exposed. She continued, each word sharper than the last. "This isn't a courtroom, but facts still matter. You misrepresented the law on national television. And for the record, the statute says the exact opposite of what you claimed." The silence broke into a wave of murmurs. Even some of Jordan's allies on the panel looked uneasy. The clip was already being clipped and shared online in real time, as staffers and journalists blasted out headlines about his mistake. Crockett closed her statement with a final punch: "The people watching at home deserve honesty, not theatrics. If this is your idea of legal expertise, I suggest you go back and reread the basics." The crowd in the hearing room reacted audibly, and the moment spread instantly across social media. Commentators declared it one of the most embarrassing moments in Jordan's recent career. What was supposed to be a routine attempt to score political points had instead turned into a public unraveling. By the end of the day, clips of Jasmine Crockett shutting him down had racked up millions of views, and hashtags calling out Jordan's legal blunder were trending worldwide. Crockett, calm and composed, had turned the tables with precision, and Jordan's attempt at a grandstand had backfired spectacularly. Jordan tried to laugh it off, forcing a grin as if Crockett's words hadn't just dismantled his entire argument. He adjusted his jacket, leaned closer to the microphone, and attempted to regain control. "Representative Crockett, with all due respect, I think you're twisting my words. The American people know what's at stake here," he said, his voice carrying that same intensity he often relied on when facts weren't on his side. But Crockett wasn't fooled, and neither was the audience. She calmly lifted a printed copy of the statute he had referenced, holding it up for everyone to see. "Mr. Jordan," she said firmly, "this isn't about twisting words. This is about accuracy. Page 12, Section B, it clearly contradicts everything you just told this committee. So unless the law has magically changed in the last 5 minutes, I'd suggest you read it before trying to spin your narrative." The cameras panned across the room, catching expressions from other lawmakers, some smirking, some looking away uncomfortably. Jordan's attempt at bravado was slipping fast. A ripple of whispers spread through the audience seated in the chamber. Reporters immediately began typing, already drafting stories that would paint Jordan as reckless and unprepared. Crockett lowered the document and gave a slight shake of her head. "This isn't theater for me," she said. "It's accountability. And if you don't understand the very laws you're using to argue your point, then you're not here to serve the people. You're here to serve yourself." The words hit hard, and the silence that followed was louder than any shout. Jordan's face tightened as he tapped his pen against the desk, visibly frustrated. He tried to lean back into his usual strategy, talking louder, talking faster, overwhelming the exchange with sheer volume. "Look, Representative Crockett," he barked, "I've been in this business a long time. I know what the law says, and I don't need a lecture from you." But the louder he got, the calmer she became. Crockett leaned forward slightly, her voice steady and measured, slicing through the noise with clarity. Experience doesn't excuse inaccuracy, she replied coolly. If you've been in this business so long, then you should know better than to misquote the law in front of the American people. That isn't strength, Mr. Jordan, that's negligence. The committee chamber shifted. People weren't just listening to her words, they were feeling the authority in her tone. It wasn't bluster. It was control. Jordan opened his mouth again, but Crockett raised her hand slightly, signaling she wasn't finished. The move itself drew a reaction. She wasn't afraid to assert herself, even as he tried to bulldoze the moment. Facts matter, she continued. Theatrics won't change that. If this is the level of preparation you're bringing to a national hearing, then maybe the American people should start asking why. The audience gasped, some even clapping before being quickly hushed by staffers. Jordan froze, his usual firepower crumbling against the weight of her precision. And just like that, the balance of power in the room had shifted, not with shouting, but with sharp, unshakable command. Jordan tried again, flipping through his papers as if he could somehow find an escape route in the fine print. His voice cracked slightly as he muttered, "That's not what I meant, what I was saying is." Crockett didn't let him off the hook. She leaned in, her eyes locked on him, and spoke with deliberate force. "No, Mr. Jordan. Words matter. The law matters. You can't misstate it on live television and then hide behind excuses. The American people deserve better than clumsy backtracking." The cameras caught every second, Jordan fumbling with his notes, Crockett standing her ground with unwavering composure. The contrast couldn't have been sharper. She pulled out another document, laying it flat on the desk for the cameras to capture. "This is the precedent from the case you conveniently left out," she said. "It clearly establishes what you tried to deny. And unless you're planning to erase history, you can't argue your way around it." Jordan blinked hard, his jaw tightening as the murmurs in the chamber grew louder. He had walked straight into a trap of his own making, and Crockett was tightening the grip with each sentence. "This isn't about shouting matches or headlines," she added. "It's about credibility. And right now, yours is hanging by a thread." The blow landed. A reporter in the press row whispered audibly, "That's it, he's done." And as Jordan sat back, visibly deflated, Crockett simply folded her hands, calm and collected, as though dismantling his argument had been the easiest task of the day. The tension in the chamber was electric. Reporters' fingers flew across keyboards, staffers whispered frantically, and the audience leaned forward, waiting to see if Jordan could salvage what little ground he had left. He cleared his throat and tried to muster some authority. "Representative Crockett, this is just partisan spin. People know what's really going on here." But before he could even finish, Crockett's voice cut cleanly across his. Calm, sharp, and merciless. "Partisan spin," she repeated. "Mr. Jordan, the only spin here is your attempt to rewrite the law on live television. The record is clear, the facts are documented, and the cameras have captured every misstep you've made today." The words hit like a hammer. The audience broke into hushed laughter, unable to ignore the irony of Jordan accusing anyone else of spin when his own mistake was now the headline. Crockett leaned back in her chair, her posture unshaken, her tone unwavering. "This isn't my opinion. It's written law. And if you can't tell the difference, then perhaps you should reconsider lecturing this committee about legal matters." Gasps echoed through the chamber. Even members who usually stood firmly in Jordan's corner looked down, unwilling to meet his eye. On social media, clips of the moment were already spreading like wildfire. Headlines popped up in real time: "Crockett exposes Jordan's legal blunder," and "Jasmine Crockett silences Jim Jordan with one devastating line." Jordan leaned back, visibly cornered, as the momentum of the entire hearing shifted permanently to Crockett's side. By the time the hearing wrapped up, the outside world was already buzzing. News outlets were running the clip on repeat, with commentators marveling at how quickly the exchange had turned. What Jordan thought would be a chance to dominate the stage had instead become his most humiliating stumble in years. Jasmine Crockett, on the other hand, walked out of the chamber with calm confidence. She didn't need to gloat, didn't need to raise her voice, the facts had spoken for her. Cameras followed her into the hallway, reporters shouting questions, but she answered only one. "Representative Crockett, how do you feel about what happened with Jim Jordan?" a journalist called out. She paused, gave a small smile, and replied, "The truth doesn't need volume. It just needs clarity." That single sentence was clipped and shared online within minutes, becoming just as viral as the confrontation itself. Memes, hashtags, and reaction videos exploded across social platforms. Viewers celebrated Crockett's composure and precision, calling it a masterclass in shutting down political theatrics. Meanwhile, Jordan's staff scrambled behind the scenes, trying to spin the story, but it was too late. The headlines had already cemented the narrative. He had made a major legal blunder, and Crockett had exposed it in front of the entire nation. What was meant to be his moment of control had turned into hers, a turning point that would be remembered long after the cameras stopped rolling. The following morning, political talk shows across the country opened with the same clip, Jasmine Crockett calmly dismantling Jim Jordan while he scrambled through his papers. Analysts paused the footage, highlighting the exact moment his confidence cracked and her authority took over. On one panel, a commentator shook his head and said, "Jordan walked in expecting to embarrass her. Instead, he handed her the biggest political win of the week." Crockett, meanwhile, used the surge of attention to double down on her message. In an interview later that day, she didn't attack Jordan personally. Instead, she pivoted to a larger point: if lawmakers can't even present the law accurately, how can the people trust them to defend it? That line resonated far beyond the hearing. Advocacy groups clipped it into campaign-style videos, young voters reposted it with captions like, "She's the future," and political rivals quietly admitted that Jordan had given her a gift he'd never live down. Inside Congress, the ripple effect was undeniable. Lawmakers who had once underestimated Crockett began treating her with newfound respect. Her ability to stay calm under pressure and turn Jordan's bluster into his undoing had elevated her stature almost overnight. Jordan, on the other hand, kept his head down. His office released a short statement trying to shift focus, but the damage was done. Every attempt at damage control only reminded people of the viral clip. And in the eyes of millions, Jasmine Crockett was no longer just another member of the committee, she was the one who shut down Jim Jordan and exposed his blunder for the world to see. Within days, the Crockett-Jordan exchange had grown into more than just a viral clip, it had become a symbol. Activists replayed it at rallies, calling it proof that precision and preparation could silence even the loudest voices in politics. Clips of Crockett's calm takedown appeared in campaign ads for other candidates who wanted to associate themselves with her style of leadership. Pundits labeled it a textbook example of how to win without shouting, a rare instance where the truth overpowered theatrics. Hashtags like #CrockettClapback and #LegalBlunder trended for days, drawing in people who didn't usually follow congressional hearings. College students shared it as motivation before debates. Even late-night comedians used Jordan's stumble as punchline material, replaying his panicked page-flipping side by side with Crockett's steady gaze. Behind the scenes, Crockett's team seized the momentum. They released a polished statement framing the moment not as a personal victory, but as a reminder of why accountability matters. When lawmakers misrepresent the law, the statement read, "The people lose." Representative Crockett will never let that go unchallenged. Meanwhile, Jordan's allies tried desperately to bury the story. They argued that the media had blown the moment out of proportion, but each denial only reignited attention. The truth was unavoidable: he had slipped, and she had caught him, on camera, in real time. And with every replay, Crockett's reputation grew stronger, transforming her from a rising figure into a political powerhouse whose words carried weight far beyond the walls of Congress. Inside the committee, the fallout was immediate. Members who once ignored Crockett's voice began watching her more carefully, weighing their words before sparring with her. The Jordan exchange had proven that she wouldn't just fight back, she would dismantle an argument piece by piece, and do it with poise. During the next session, the atmosphere felt different. Jordan sat quieter than usual, avoiding eye contact, while others who typically aligned with him hesitated before challenging Crockett. It was as if the viral moment had recalibrated the power dynamics in the room. Colleagues from both parties approached her privately, some offering quiet respect, others acknowledging that her sharp grasp of the law was impossible to overlook. "You set a new standard," one lawmaker admitted in passing. Even the committee chair took note, giving Crockett more room to question witnesses and frame the discussion. She had earned a new authority, not because she shouted the loudest, but because she made her opponents stumble with facts they couldn't escape. For Jordan, the shift was humiliating. The man known for dominating with sheer volume found himself overshadowed, his credibility chipped away every time Crockett entered the conversation. What had once been his stage had now become hers. And beyond the walls of Congress, the public noticed. Commentators framed it as a generational clash, old-school politics built on bluster versus a new era built on precision. And in that clash, Jasmine Crockett had emerged as the face of something different, something people were eager to see more of. Outside Washington, the Crockett-Jordan showdown took on a life of its own. Across the country, people who had never tuned into a congressional hearing before were suddenly sharing the clip at dinner tables, in classrooms, and on job sites. For many, it wasn't just about politics, it was about watching someone stand their ground against arrogance and win with nothing but preparation and facts. Teachers showed it in civics classes as a lesson in accountability. Debate coaches replayed it as an example of composure under fire. Local news anchors covered the story as if it were a cultural moment, not just a political one. "This is what people want from their leaders," one anchor said. "Clarity, honesty, and the courage to confront misinformation in real time." Polls reflected the shift. Crockett's recognition soared nationally, her approval climbing even in districts far outside her own. Meanwhile, Jordan's numbers dipped, with respondents saying the clip made them question his credibility. On late-night talk shows, comedians joked about Jordan's magical disappearing statute and compared his frantic page-flipping to a student who hadn't studied for the exam. Crockett's calm response, by contrast, was praised as a mic-drop moment. By the end of the week, it was clear the exchange had broken through the noise of partisan politics. People weren't just talking about a committee hearing, they were talking about how Jasmine Crockett had embodied what many Americans longed to see: strength without shouting, truth without theatrics. Campaign strategists across the country quickly recognized the power of the Crockett-Jordan clip. Within days, it was being spliced into ads, speeches, and fundraising emails, not only by Crockett's allies, but by candidates who wanted to tie themselves to her brand of direct, fact-driven leadership. One campaign video opened with Jordan fumbling through his notes, then cut to Crockett's calm voice saying, "The truth doesn't need volume. It just needs clarity." The line hit like a slogan, and it spread beyond politics into everyday conversations. Editorial boards praised her for restoring faith in congressional hearings, calling it a rare example of substance triumphing over showmanship. Think pieces described the exchange as a turning point, proof that younger voices in Congress were reshaping what leadership looked like. Meanwhile, Jordan's stumble was replayed relentlessly by the press. Every time his office tried to pivot to another issue, reporters brought the conversation back to his legal blunder. Political cartoons mocked him, and late-night hosts joked that his law degree should come with an asterisk. Behind the scenes, party leaders noticed the momentum. Some worried that Jordan had become a liability, while others quietly admitted Crockett had set a new bar that few could match. And as the midterm season heated up, Crockett's name appeared in more headlines, her influence growing as the clip continued to define the national conversation. She wasn't just the representative who shut Jordan down, she was becoming a symbol of a new kind of leadership, calm, prepared, and unflinching in the face of bluster. Jasmine Crockett understood the power of the moment. Instead of letting the media alone shape the narrative, she leaned into it with precision. In speeches across the following weeks, she didn't mention Jordan by name, but she repeated the same theme: accountability, clarity, and truth. At a town hall, she told constituents, "That hearing wasn't about me. It wasn't about him. It was about whether people in power can mislead you without consequences. And I won't stand by and let that happen. The crowd erupted in applause. Her team rolled out a series of short videos highlighting her words during the exchange, branding them as lessons in leadership. Clips of her saying, "Experience doesn't excuse inaccuracy," and "Facts still matter," became rallying cries online. Supporters printed them on posters, t-shirts, even bumper stickers. Crockett also used the newfound spotlight to champion legislation she had been pushing quietly for months. Suddenly, her bills were drawing co-sponsors who wanted to ride the wave of her credibility. What had begun as a viral clip was now reshaping real policy discussions. Meanwhile, Jordan tried to avoid further embarrassment, ducking interviews and deflecting questions. But the silence only made the contrast clearer. While he shrank from the spotlight, Crockett thrived in it. She wasn't just surviving the moment, she was owning it, turning a single televised confrontation into a platform for lasting influence. As weeks turned into months, Jasmine Crockett's profile skyrocketed far beyond her district. National outlets invited her for interviews, framing her as one of the rising stars in Congress. Headlines read, "The representative who took on Jim Jordan, and won." What struck viewers wasn't just her sharp takedown of Jordan, but her calm consistency afterward. She never seemed rattled, never let the fame pull her off course. Instead, she used every platform to repeat the same message: facts are stronger than theatrics. Polls confirmed the shift. In states where few had known her name before, recognition levels soared. Political analysts debated whether she was becoming the face of a new wave of leadership, leaders who could cut through noise without losing their composure. Meanwhile, Jordan's reputation suffered the opposite fate. The viral clip shadowed him at every appearance, with journalists asking pointed questions he couldn't easily shake. His attempt to dominate had left him diminished, while Crockett's reputation only grew. Commentators compared the moment to other historic congressional exchanges, noting how rarely a single event could so dramatically redefine careers. But this one had, and the balance wasn't in Jordan's favor. By now, Crockett wasn't just seen as the representative who shut down Jim Jordan. She was being talked about as someone whose influence could shape national conversations for years to come. Months later, the Crockett-Jordan exchange had cemented itself as more than just a viral clip, it was now political lore. Commentators began referencing it alongside other legendary congressional takedowns, replaying it during anniversary specials about moments that changed the debate. At rallies, supporters quoted Crockett's lines back to her, especially, "The truth doesn't need volume. It just needs clarity." That phrase had become a mantra, printed on banners and repeated in speeches by allies who wanted to capture the same authority she had displayed. Even in academic settings, the showdown was studied. Law professors showed the clip in lectures, highlighting how a single misstep in legal interpretation could unravel under the scrutiny of someone well prepared. Debate teams broke down her composure, teaching it as a strategy for dismantling aggressive opponents. Meanwhile, Jordan could never quite shake the ghost of that moment. Every time he raised his voice in a new hearing, social media users flooded timelines with the infamous clip, captioned, "Here we go again." His blunder had become a punchline, while Crockett's calm dismantling had become the benchmark for political strength. Inside Congress, younger members often whispered about it as a turning point, the day a rising leader proved she could dominate the national stage. To them, it was proof that skill and preparation could topple even the loudest of voices. And for Crockett, the legacy of that exchange followed her everywhere, not as a shadow, but as a badge of honor, forever tied to her name in the annals of political history. By the time the dust had fully settled, it was clear, that single exchange had permanently altered Jasmine Crockett's political trajectory. What began as a tense clash in a committee room became the defining moment that pushed her onto the national stage. She was no longer introduced on television as "Representative from Texas." Now she was the lawmaker who shut down Jim Jordan. That title carried weight, and it opened doors that once seemed far away. Invitations poured in from conferences, universities, and policy forums where she was asked not just to speak, but to lead discussions. Crockett didn't waste the momentum. She poured her new platform into pushing forward legislation, rallying grassroots support, and amplifying voices that often went unheard. Each time she stood before a camera, people remembered the moment she had calmly, surgically dismantled Jordan's bluster, and they expected the same clarity and strength. She delivered every time. For Jordan, the memory lingered like an open wound. No matter how many new fights he picked, the shadow of that viral blunder followed him. He had become the cautionary tale, the example of how arrogance can collapse in the face of preparation. And so, the story lived on. Not just as a viral clip, not just as a meme, but as a marker in modern politics, the day Jasmine Crockett proved that precision could outshine volume, and truth could silence even the loudest voice in the room. Her rise from that moment wasn't temporary. It was transformative. From that day forward, Jasmine Crockett wasn't just a participant in the national conversation. She was a force shaping it, and the people knew it.